achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 87 event, which will take place from Rotterdam, Netherlands on May 8th, featuring Alistair Overeem taking on Andrei Arlovski in the main event. I'll be giving you my 6 main card predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary breakdowns and predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I don't have a lot of time today, so I'm going to try and get through my predictions a little bit quicker than normal. I am coming off a very solid 11-1 showing at UFC 197, where bet packs produced 138 units in winnings. So if you bet $10 per unit, that turns you just short of $1,400. If you're a low ball bettor and you bet $1, which is totally fine, you turn back $140 for, I think it was like $30 in bets. That's a pretty sizable return. That's the second time in 3 shows maybe, I've put together double digits, putting you at almost 300 units won over the last 4 shows, which is a pretty decent return. We've got a lot going on. We've got 6 fights to break down, a lot of issues in the UFC I'd love to talk about, just don't have the time, so let's get to that first main card prediction. The opening fight of the night takes place in the women's strawweight division as the 10th-ranked Karolina Kowalkiewicz of Poland, undefeated at 8-0, takes on Ultimate Fighter competitor Heather Jo Clark with a record of 7 wins and 4 losses. Now, both girls are coming off upset victories and both taking place in their UFC debuts. Clark was on the Ultimate Fighter, as I already mentioned, but she is coming in off a 16-month layoff for this fight. She is the larger woman, 3 inches taller, but Kowalkiewicz will have a 1-inch reach advantage and is 5 years younger. And with Clark being nearly 36, turning that 36 in September, you have to wonder for a lighter weight class, is she getting to that age where you just can't keep up with the younger fighters? Now, for the Polish fighter, she's the former KSW champ. As I said, undefeated, striking-based, 1 win by knockout, though 2 wins by submission. She is 5-0 on the scorecards. For the American, BJJ Purple Belt, 2-1 in fights ending by knockout, with her only knockout loss coming via doctor stoppage. She is 3-0 in submissions and has a slightly below 500 record of 2-3 on the scorecards. Looking at Kowalkiewicz first, she's a high-volume output, striker. Throws a lot of combinations, good volume overall, good head movement, likes to throw a nice straight right. Inside low kicks seem to be another one of her effective techniques, and she'll finish a lot of her combinations with that low kick. Starts combinations by going to the body and will move up to the head, throws a nice side kick, works in an uppercut, a lot of elbows at range, and she can be an effective counter striker. She can also strike, move in, close that distance, do damage in tight. When she's in the clinch, controls head and will toss some nice strikes in succession. Also look for, if they're tied up, because I expect to see Heather Jo Clark engaging in the clinch a lot, Kowalkiewicz will attack off the break, and she has big power and she'll mix in some knees in close range. When she defeated Randamie Marcos, she used her volume, 66 overall strikes, limited Marcos to just 34 significant connections, and we really saw Karolina pull away in the second and third rounds, outlanding her by a total of 43-16, and she defended 8 of 9 takedowns, and that was her key to success, was staying vertical. Now for Clark, she has decent striking, but she's not nearly as refined as her opponent in this fight. She gave up much more, more strikes landed in the Rawlings fight. I think Rawlings outlanded her by not quite 15 total strikes in that fight, but significant strikes. What Heather Jo Clark was able to do is keep the overall strikes closer, remain active, and her key was getting the grappling advantage. She scored, I think, it just only shows 1 takedown, but I saw multiple occasions where she was able to put her on her back, had some good positional control on the mat, got her back at one point even, and really made that time count for her. 2 of her 3 wins have come by rear naked choke, and we did see Randamie Marcos have success against Kowalkiewicz, putting her on the ground, getting to her back. That was her biggest moment in that fight. I believe it took place in the 2nd round. That will be the key to success for Heather Jo. She needs takedowns. She needs to get this fight to the ground, and she needs to keep Karolina there. Overall, Kowalkiewicz has superior technique, better volume. She should be the faster, more quicker fighter. She'll push the pace. She can do damage both inside and outside. And I think it's simply going to be too much for Heather Jo Clark. I don't think Clark will be able to keep up. And my prediction is Karolina Kowalkiewicz to defeat Heather Jo Clark by decision. Fight number 2 in the main card is a UFC light heavyweight battle as Ukraine's 14th-ranked Nikita Al Capone Krylov, 19 wins and 4 defeats, takes on Brazil's Francimar Barroso with a current record of 18 wins and 4 defeats. Now, Krylov has won 3 fights in a row, and he's 4-2 in the UFC. And for his long 23-fight career, despite him being a young fighter, he has only gone outside of the first round on 1 occasion. For Francimar Barroso, he's 3-1 in the UFC, surprisingly, despite not really having a lot of momentum behind him. He has gone the distance in 4 consecutive fights after going there just once through his first 18 pro bouts. 2-inch height advantage for Krylov. He's also 12 years younger, and he formerly competed at heavyweight. Now for Barroso, he has 8 wins by knockout, 6 submission wins, and he is 4-1 on the scorecards. He's a BJJ black belt and also a black belt in kickboxing. The big number on the other side that stands out to me, he has 3 losses by knockout. For Krylov, he comes in with 7 wins by knockout, 12 wins by submission. He is a finisher. He's never gone the distance, as I said. 3 losses on his record by submission, 1 loss by knockout, which came against Soa Paleli at heavyweight. He has a background in both karate and submission grappling. Now for Krylov, as I said, very quick fights. The one fight against Paleli where he went into the 3rd round, he gassed out and was eventually finished, but Soa was gassed too, and again, that was his debut. And of course, I said fought at heavyweight. For Barroso, he has a history of going into longer fights, as I said, especially in his most recent bouts. But he has a tendency to slow down as well, and he's not a high output guy anyway. So as he starts to slow down, his ability to really keep up with guys drops off. What Barroso does well, he has a decent body kick, and of course, I believe he's coming from Novo União, so the kicking game is usually one of their best aspects. He throws a lot of single strikes, though, tends to let his opponents control the pace and get off first in a lot of the exchanges. When you look at his overall striking numbers through the UFC, 2.83 strikes landed per minute versus 2.27 strikes absorbed. It's a very close comparison there, and that's not going to help out in a longer fight if he can't put guys away. He is coming off his best overall performance with 57 strikes landed in his last matchup, and in the only fight where he allowed 40 or more, that was his 1 loss to Hans Stringer, coming in Brazil by split decision, which it's surprising to see that. He will work his takedowns. He used a lot of top control against Elvis Muchopik in his last matchup, and he had 3 in the Stringer loss as well, so he can go there, and I expect him to try that in this matchup. For Krylov, he's exceptionally aggressive, 5.96 strikes landed per minute. He keeps attacking. He has a very decent kicking game. When he fought Walt Harris at heavyweight, he hurt him with a head kick and finished him fairly quickly. He can do damage from the clinch, land short punches, will go for takedowns, but he is the type of fighter who goes submission over position, and that is certainly concerning. Cody Donovan had success taking him down a couple of times in that fight, but the thing with Krylov is he kept attacking and eventually worked his way to a dominant position. When he fought Stanislav Nadkov, as soon as they got in the clinch, he was looking for a submission. He eventually locked up a choke, transitioned to I think it was a power guillotine, standing guillotine, and forced him to submit. His pace will be very difficult to maintain. He's the type of fighter who's not going to be able to do what he does. At least I wouldn't expect him to do over 3 rounds, because he hasn't shown us he can do that over 3 rounds. But it's also going to be equally as difficult for Barroso to deal with, especially in the early action. If he can't deal with that pace, he will slow down equally as much. I think Krylov's ability to both finish and push the pace early will be too much for Barroso, who, as I said, lets his opponents lead the dance and slows down. So either he's going to get finished, or he's going to be so exhausted defending that onslaught. If Krylov slows down, Barroso will be equally as diminished and won't be able to capitalize on it. Again, I don't think he has the Brazilian does not have that cardio to push back in the later half of the fight. Krylov has a ton of momentum behind him, and my prediction is Nikita Krylov to defeat Francimar Barroso by TKO. Bout number 3 on the main card goes to the women's bantamweight division, as the 14th ranked Germaine, the Iron Lady de Randamie, 5-3, fighting out of the Netherlands, fighting at home, taking on Anna Elmose of Denmark, who is debuting. I'm probably butchering her name. I didn't get a chance to research that. For Elmose, she's debuting in the UFC after just 3 pro fights, and for de Randamie, she has 8 overall UFC bouts, 6 though of those taking place between either the UFC or Strikeforce, so fighting at a fairly high level, because Strikeforce at one point was one of the highest levels for women to compete before the UFC got in the game. But keep in mind, the Dutch striker has a long history of kickboxing bouts. Now, I've seen her record in different things. I'm going to go with 37-0 as a kickboxer. Nonetheless, whether you're 37-0 or 50-0, it's an incredibly impressive run in a combat sport. For Elmose, all 3 of her wins have come by knockout, including a 19-second pro debut finish of her opponent. But the level of opponent has been fairly low, which is expected when you've only fought 3 times on the regional scene. Her first 2 fighters had a combined record of 2-7. Her last opponent that she finished, overall record of 6-4. They did, though, all 3 of them have a combined rate of 7 losses by knockout, which suggests they were very prone to being finished. For de Randamie, 2 wins by knockout in her career, 3 by decision. She has 1 loss in each of the 3 categories, but all are ground-based defeats. Her TKO versus Amanda Nunes came on the ground, and Julia Budd, back when they fought in Strikeforce at 145 pounds, also capitalized on her takedown ability and took advantage of that. For Elmose, she's a very compact fighter, probably too big to fight at 115 pounds, might be able to make the transition to 125 if that becomes a reality. But that height and reach fighting against the elite at 135 is certainly a concern. For de Randamie, formerly fought at 145 pounds, so she's used to fighting bigger women. 6-inch height advantage, an unknown reach, probably anywhere from 4 to 7 inches. That's pretty significant. It could be more. Now, for the newcomer, she is a bruiser, throws very hard strikes, looks to overwhelm her opponent. She has very good power. Knocked out her last opponent along the cage with a brutal flurry. It was a very impressive knockout. Now, she does also pretty good work in the clinch, controlling her opponent, creating avenues to land strikes. The big question is, how is she going to fare against a Dutch Muay Thai striker who both is a very sound clinch fighter and is significantly taller than her? That's also going to be an issue. There are additional questions about the newcomer's cardio. She has a very short fight, so not experienced going into deeper waters. Very aggressive style. How does she maintain it over a longer fight? And that's a big question. Now, for GDR, she's a classically trained Dutch Muay Thai striker. Very technically sound. Strong right hand, very good uppercut. She's exceptionally powerful, good kicks, really chops into her kicks, and defensively sound as well. She throws an exceptionally nice right jab, slips off to the side after throwing it and tosses out, a left jab, then tosses out a right hook, and really loads up with her power when she realizes there's no threat of a takedown like we saw in her last fight against Larissa Pachenko. And when she fought Pachenko, she landed a couple of big right hands prior to, right leading up to the stoppage. Got a score standing knockout, which is very impressive. Lots of feints and fakes to draw out her offense and create opportunities for her to counter. Also, in that clinch, very strong in that position, lots of knees. For Elmose, she's going to have trouble landing at distance with the combination of the height and Randamie's clinch skills. It'll make it difficult for the newcomer to get inside and do damage in that position as well. The big issue for Anna is she's going to need to travel down that route that a lot of the other people that had success against Germaine had success with, is takedowns. Put her on the ground. Does she have that ground game? We have yet to really see her use it in her recent fights. I think overall the size, caliber of opponent, lack of experience are all big factors here for the UFC newcomer, considering she's also fighting in enemy territory. Germaine Randamie is a capable, experienced MMA fighter and more experienced combat competitor as a Muay Thai striker, as a kickboxer. So my prediction is Germaine Randamie to defeat Anna Elmose by TKO. And again, I apologize. I probably butchered that name. Fight number 4 in the main card takes place in the UFC's welterweight division as the 13th ranked Albert Einstein Tumenov of Russia, 17-2, takes on the now unranked Gunnar Nelson of Iceland with a current record of 14 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. Now, this is a huge fight for both men. Nelson has lost 2 of his last 3. He's coming off a very humbling loss to Damian Maia. He got out-grappled on the mat. So, yeah, when you fight Maia, that's what you're expecting. He got put down pretty consistently. For Tumenov, he has won 5 in a row since dropping a split decision debut. He took a split win over Lorenz Larkin in a very entertaining bout last time out. Physically, same height, both 5'11", 1-inch reach for Tumenov. He's also 3 years younger. Now for Tumenov, overall he has 11 wins by knockout, 6-2 in the scorecards. Both of his losses coming by split decision. He is a national master of sport in boxing and in hand-to-hand combat. For Nelson, black belt in both karate and BJJ, 3 wins by knockout, 10 by submission, 1-2 though in the scorecards, which is certainly concerning. And he has been in the UFC since 2012. Now, looking at, which is surprising, sorry, I wanted to highlight that. It seems like he just, it's not that long ago he debuted. He's already been here for 4 years. Now, looking at this fight, you have Tumenov's striking and brutal power versus Nelson's world-level grappling and capable karate striking style. For Tumenov, he has defended 83% of his opponent's takedowns. Nico Masoki went 0 for 10 in his attempts, but Ildemar Alcantara in his debut went 4 of 7 on his shot. For Nelson, he's not a high-volume striking guy, high-volume takedown fighter. His career high so far has been 2, which he landed against Jorge Santiago, and that so far has been his UFC best. When you look at Nelson, he has a ton of takedown opportunities or techniques. Clinch, inside trip. We saw that against Rick Story. He'll shoot from the outside. He's just overall very nice techniques. Once he gets on the mat, he's a smotherer, really ties his opponent up, works his submissions. We'll look for backmount. He has 4 wins by rear naked choke and 1 by neck crank as well. For Nelson, what he does, even though he doesn't get a lot of takedowns, he makes the most of them on the mat and usually finishes. Looking at Tumenov, he throws an exceptionally strong spearing left jab, stands in the pockets, fires hard 1-2s, very fast hands, power in his hands overall. The impact of his strikes against Nico Masoki was the difference. He mixes up his counters and attacks very well. Really, he'll catch body kicks and fire back big counter right hands. When he took out Dwyer, he caught him with a brutal left high kick, landed a second and put him down. Against Alan Jouban, he landed a right high kick and did it through the guard, which appeared to stun him prior to the finish. Overall, when you look at Gunny Nelson on his striking, he's a very capable striker. He stopped both Omari Akhmedov and Brandon Thatch prior to submitting them, or he dropped them, sorry. And for Nelson, he has a karate stance, very calm, measured fighter, fights from range very well, counter strikes, will go both the body and head with his kicks, minimal wind-up overall, and will flurry with his hands when he does attack. What I don't like is he holds his hands very low. He was taking some hard leg kicks against Rick Story, which is certainly concerning, and he has taken some big shots in fights, and he did slow down in the Story fight over 3 rounds. He got outworked, clipped and dropped in the 4th round by by story. The key for Tumenov will be landing impactful strikes and remaining vertical and backing Gunny off. Make him start to hesitate. Nelson has to keep active on the feet, not let him set up, make the most of his takedown opportunities. Nelson has seemed a little bit too willing for me to stand and trade with his opponents, and the impact of strikes from Tumenov will catch up with him if he does that. I think we're going to see Nelson come out, focus heavily on his BJJ here, look to get back in the win column, and I'm going to pick a little bit of an upset here. I think Gunnar Nelson holds his own on the feet, lands some key takedowns. Tumenov starts to get a little bit backed off because of the threat of the takedown, and my prediction is Gunnar Nelson to defeat Albert Tumenov by submission. Moving now to the co-main event of the evening, we have the first of two main card heavyweight bouts. This one features the 12th ranked Antonio Bigfoot Silva, 19 wins, 8 losses, and 1 no contest, taking on Stefan the skyscraper Struve, also fighting out of the Netherlands, 30 wins and 8 defeats. Now, both fighters are in tough spots in their career. Bigfoot just has 1 win in his last 6 fights. He also has a draw in there against Mark Hunt. For Stefan Struve, he only has 1 victory in his last 4 fights. He obviously having those physical issues, those ailments that certainly slowed him down when he was having a little bit of success. We'll talk about that momentarily. Physically, Struve is 7 inches taller at 6'11", nearly 7 feet tall. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage. He is also the younger man by 9 years. Physically, they should both weigh in right around the heavyweight limit. Now, for Silva, 14 wins by knockout overall, but he has been knocked out 7 times. That's the big number, the counter number that stands out. And you look at the number of people that have knocked, his last 6 losses have all come by knockout. Mark Hunt, Francimar, Andrei Arlovski, Cain Velasquez again, and then Daniel Cormier dating all the way back to the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix semifinals. For Stefan Struve, he has 7 wins by knockout, but he has also been knocked out several times, 6 losses, with his last 4 coming against Alistair Overeem, Mark Hunt, Travis Brown, and Roy Nelson. Last 5, and Junior Dos Santos. His most recent defeat, of course, coming against Jared Rosholt via decision. Another number that does stand out, Struve has 16 wins by submission. Now, Bigfoot, who is a BJJ black belt, doesn't have nearly the submission victories on his resume. Bigfoot has really never looked the same since his TRT issues. He wasn't a quick fighter to start with, but he's slowed down tremendously. He's become much more hittable, and with his chin is just not there anymore to take that type of punishment that heavyweights can dish out. His only recent victory, of course, coming over Soa Palele, came because Soa dominated him in the first round and then gassed hard in the second, and Bigfoot was able to finish him. Had Soa had maybe another 30 seconds to a minute at the end of round 1, he probably would have won that fight. For Struve, he's looked overly sluggish as well since returning to action. He really struggled to pull the trigger against the Jared Rosholt fight. In the Jared Rosholt fight, spent a lot of time on his back, really did not look good. Even in his victory over Nogueira, Big Nog, who's now retired, Struve hurt him a couple times, but still, he should have. You'd think with his physical gifts and where Nogueira was in his career, I thought Struve would have won that fight more decisively. But you look back at what Stefan Struve was doing before he had all his physical ailments and started having all those issues. He was really hitting his stride, winning 6 of 7. Then he got knocked out by Mark Hunt in a brutal fight. Had the follow-up issues we talked about, and now he's really struggled since coming back. I might attribute some of that to the extra weight he's put on. He's always been a guy who's been working on getting to that 265-pound limit, packing onto a 7-foot-tall frame, and I wonder if that's not slowed him down, made him far less effective. We just saw John Jones maybe having a few issues with powerlifting and putting on some extra weight. Maybe that's affecting Stefan Struve as well. Now, the way I look at these two fighters, I think Bigfoot is pretty much done. Where Struve being so much younger, I think he's the type of fighter who could get himself back into, not in title contention by any stretch of the imagination, get him back to being a solid gatekeeper and winning fights and looking good inside the cage. I think Silva, as I said, the Soa win is the only one he's had in recent memory. It certainly was not an impressive victory. Rosholt, the wrestling and durability helped him to grind down Struve. Also, being so much shorter allowed him to duck under and take him down. With Bigfoot coming in at 6'4" and presenting such a large, gargantuan target for Struve to attack, just being a big physical man, I think it's going to give Stefan Struve the ability to hit him. Additionally, Bigfoot is so much slower, so the target zone that Struve has to aim at is going to be much bigger. I think the reach of Struve combined with the lack of overall speed for Silva, for Bigfoot, should make him quite hittable and should allow Struve. We saw him land a couple nice right hands that hurt Nogueira and wobbled him. I think he can do the same against Bigfoot and follow it up. It could be a kind of a horrendous fight if it goes the distance or goes deep, but my prediction is Stefan Struve to defeat Antonio Bigfoot Silva by knockout. We move now to the main event of the evening, also in the UFC's heavyweight division, as former Strikeforce heavyweight champion, the 3rd-ranked Alistair the Reem Overeem, 40 wins, 14 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on the 5th-ranked Andrei the Pitbull Arlovski from Belarus, also a former UFC champion. His current record sits 25 wins, 11 losses, and 1 no contest. Overeem is on the cusp of a title shot. He's finally hit his stride in the UFC that many anticipated him reaching once he left Strikeforce and entered the octagon. He is very close to earning that shot at the title. This fight could very well put him over the top. For Arlovski, he's coming off a big setback, as he was also very close to getting that opportunity. He lost to Stipe Miocic in dominant fashion, who is now fighting for the title. Both are Jackson Wink-trained fighters. Overeem obviously came after Andrei Arlovski, so that presents a very interesting overtone to this matchup. The familiarity on both sides is going to be there. It almost puts it in that rematch scenario that I like to look at, where fighters are very familiar with one another because they've spent so much time training and facing each other, that a finish is very likely. Overeem, 1 inch taller, 3 inch height advantage. He will be 10 to 15 pounds heavier than the Pitbull when this fight takes place. Both have knockout power, significant knockout power. Both men have 17 career knockouts on their resume. Interestingly enough, though, both men recently fought Francimar, and both men took Frank to decision, which is a result that many people, including myself, did not anticipate. Now, the other side of things, both have big chin concerns. Overeem, 9 losses by knockout. Andrei Arlovski's been knocked out 8 times. So both guys, if you hit them flush, they're going down. Both guys recently, though, have seemed to remedy those issues a little bit, especially with Overeem's recent success. Andrei Arlovski went a long run without being knocked out until his last fight. Another big question is Overeem's cardio. How long under his previous efforts could he continue on with that that pace? It seems like he slowed down, but since his body appears to have changed, maybe there's some issues there that I really don't want to talk about as far as PEDs are concerned. It appears his body is not as muscular, as beefed up as it used to be. He seems like he can carry a more controlled and more his own pace much better longer into fights. We'll see how that holds up. Arlovski, when he fought Frank Mir, it wasn't an overly taxing matchup, but he certainly wasn't lighting the world on fire in the final parts of that matchup either. Now, as I said, Overeem has been using a much more strategic-based offense, more calculated, and it was working against Ben Rothwell. He's landing good strikes until Rothwell eventually clipped him. Had similar success against Brown. He hurt him, went to finish him, gassed out, and got finished. Same thing, that was dominating Bigfoot Silva, but he really, in his recent fights, those benefits have really started to show up, especially in his last 3 matchups. The only real blunder we've seen was when he got hurt late by Roy Nelson, who has, cinder blocks for hands. If he hits you, you're going to go down. And Overeem survived, but still he's shown a much more calculated front. And, of course, that big one, knocking out Junior Dos Santos, was absolutely huge. Another thing with Overeem, he's become very hard to hit. He presents such a physical threat and a defensive front. He's very difficult to attack, and that's an issue that if he is able to maintain that, Arlovski's going to struggle to find offense, even though it only may take 1 punch to change this fight. When you look at Andrei's fights, he had sleeper decisions over Brendan Schaub and Frank Mir. He stopped Bigfoot Silva, which seems to be a thing that most people are doing nowadays. When he beat Brown, it was an absolute firefight, where he almost got knocked out in that matchup. He eventually knocked him out. It was an absolute firefight, and he got knocked out against Stipe. So it's either one or the other. It's either you're knocking guys out, or you're having, or getting knocked out, or you're having really crappy, boring fights. He tends to, it's either that slow-paced snorefest, or it's an absolute brawl. Now, Arlovski still has exceptionally sound boxing. He has good skill, and he has the ability to take out Andrei Arlovski if he can find that gear. But we know he's had issues with pulling the trigger, and we saw with Junior Dos Santos, Overeem has such a solid defensive front and presents such an offensive threat as far as his power is concerned. It can be difficult to really engage. I think the knockout to Stipe Miocic has brought some of those issues screaming back to the forefront for Andrei Arlovski. After 12 fights, almost 5 years ago getting knocked out, he was knocked out pretty violently. Cost me money. I remember that actually. Cost me. I had the over 1.5 in that fight. And as a result, I think he's going to come in much more cautious, less willing to take risks here. Both guys have ground skills if they look to take it that direction. I don't anticipate seeing that happening much in this fight. Again, I said Arlovski has issues with freezing up when getting tagged, and Overeem has the type of power to create that, even with a jab. If Andrei can't catch him in a crazy ball, I think it could be a long, drawn-out fight, and it's not going to favor him. Sorry, crazy brawl. But overall, I said Overeem is hitting his stride. His confidence issues are up. Andrei, the other way, could be down a little bit after that big loss. I think Overeem's going to lull him into a slow-paced fight, really drag it out, and then catch him with something. And my prediction is Alistair Overeem to defeat Andrei Arlovski by knockout. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 87, which will take place in the Netherlands. I think it is the UFC's first touchdown in that country. Certainly consider buying the bet packs. I've had a lot of success lately. I've gone 3 consecutive shows, which with fantastic records. I believe I went 11-1, 8 11-2, 8-3, and 11-1 over that run. And the 8-3, I could have easily been double digits had Lyoto Machida and Islam Makhachev not been pulled from the cards. Those could have been my 2 additional wins to go 10-3. Nonetheless, I've won two significant returns with my bet packs. I've had solid fantasy numbers as well, including one that was pushing 400. I think it was just short of 380 points, which won me some cash. Hopefully it won you some as well. And I put a lot of work in, put a lot of effort in. Remember, this is a Sunday event, so I hopefully will have everything up by Friday, but it could move into Saturday before I have everything posted. Certainly check out the preliminary predictions at kamikazeoverdrive.net. We have a lot of fights coming up in the future. So ladies and gentlemen, as always, I will see you after the bell. Take care and good luck.